That's your recording now, Provost.
Thank you very much, Leona. Well, firstly, everybody, welcome, and thank you very much for turning up tonight. And such nice weather outside. I'm sure we've all got better things to do, at least if you're able to leave the house, you have. Can I, as always, just ask for your patience this evening. I'll try and allow people to speak as much and as often as they want, but if I can just ask you to be respectful and to be brief, and everybody will be heard who wants to be heard, and I'll be as flexible as I can be about the length of time and such like. Can I just remind everybody that the meeting is being recorded and will be published on the Council's YouTube channel. But before we do start tonight, as I'm sure you're aware, we had a very sad bereavement. Our former Provost Mackey passed away a few weeks ago. Many of you will, of course, know Provost Mackey better than I did, perhaps, and many of us will have worked with him over a long period, both within the council chamber and community councils and such like. He was a very quiet man, but a very effective man, and I did manage to be at the funeral to represent the council. But I thought it might be appropriate tonight if we could maybe just kick off with a period of silence, and we can have our own thoughts about remembering Alec Mackey. So I'll give a minute's silence now. Thank you.
Thank you, Provost.
Thank you very much, Eamon. Thank you, everybody, for your respects. Can we move on and take any apologies for absence this evening? Do we have any
Thank you,
apologies?
Provost. Apologies this evening from Councillor, beg your pardon, Councillor McLean and Councillor Devlin. Okay,
thank you very much. Do we have any declarations of interest this evening? Can I remind you that the Councillors' Code of Conduct requires elected members to declare any financial or non-financial interest they may have in any items on the agenda here this evening. Do we have any declarations of interest? No, that's good. I don't think there's anything with the trust that we need to declare. Thank you. Can I move on to the minute volume then, and propose just to do as we've done in previous occasions, go through the minutes one by one. And can I remind councillors that the minute of the council is simply a matter of accuracy. So if you have any questions on it, it has to be the accuracy of the minute. But obviously the full minute agenda, you can ask about the accuracy or a question on them. But to make it easier, I would go through the minute volume on chronological order. But can I ask you, if you do have a question, to have the page number ready so as everybody can turn to the page number with your question. Okay. Thank you for that. So the first one is the, item 3 is the meeting of the full council, which was held on the 28th of April. And as I say, are there any matters of accuracy on that council minute? Don't see any hands up. Or so I do, Councillor Wallace.
Off mute, yes. It's quite confusing when you say what page number, because it's page number 2 of the actual minutes here, but it's page 1512 at the top of the sheet. However, if you can follow my drift here, it was to do with the notice of motion, you mentioned in terms of accuracy, the accuracy here being that it was to instruct officers to proactively seek fields in trust status. So just in terms of just making sure that this has been proactively done, I wonder if there's any chance of an update to see where we are with that motion and whether it's been carried out. Thank you.
Happy to answer that, Provost.
Yeah.
Yeah. A meeting was arranged with Fields and Trust to progress it. Had to be cancelled through a COVID-related illness on the other side, as far as I'm aware. And the meeting was rearranged for, from memory, 14th June to progress the matter and draw it to a conclusion, as in to register for a memorandum of understanding with Fields and Trust. So, Councillor Worrell's been progressed.
Excellent, Provost. Thank you for that, and thank you, Mr. Cahill, for your support and for following this through. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions on accuracy in the minute? Okay, can I accept the minute as a true record and move on to item number 4, which is the minute volume from 29th April to the Audit Committee of the 24th of June. So can I take the Audit and Scrutiny Committee of 29th April? And does anybody have any questions on it? And I'm really running with the page numbers at the top, so that would be page 1515 at the start of that one, just for clarity. Any issues with the Audit and Scrutiny? No. Can I move on to the Cabinet of the 13th of May? No, don't see any hands. The Planning Applications Committee of the 19th of May? All happy. The Local Review Body of the 19th of May? The Cabinet of the 3rd of June? Okay. The Licensing Committee of the 8th of June? The Local Review Body of the 9th of June? Oh, no hands. The Education Committee of the 10th of June? And the Police and Fire Cabinet of the 17th of June? The last one I have, the Audit and Scrutiny Committee of the 24th of June. No issues with the minutes. Okay, can we approve them and move on? Thank you very much. And to item number 5, which is items remitted to the Council in relation to the Glasgow City Region City deal. And this is an update. Now, this report, as you will see, has been remitted from the Cabinet, which considered it, I believe, at length on the 3rd of June. And we're looking for Council approval to the change in the City deal projects. So I'm happy to open it up for any comments or questions in the report. Thank you. Councillor Miller.
Thank you very much, Provost. Excuse me. I think it's, I hope we realise I'm very pleased to see the report, and I commend the Council for developing both the foundry, the Levern Works, and pushing ahead with the new rail station, albeit at a vastly enhanced price, but which will help the residents of South Barhead and Neilson, especially all the new residents of Springfield Road area. I'm especially pleased that the Greenlaw Works Business Centre is up and running, albeit not yet occupied because of COVID, which is something the Conservative Group had proposed in previous budgets over the past, what, 12 or 13 years. I'm also pleased to see the investment in the Country Park and the redesign and renewal of Orrs Road as a major link between Levern Valley and Newton Mercer. It will be a fantastic enhancement to the connectivity of both areas. And I'm sure that no one here will be surprised to hear that. I'm especially delighted to hear that the proposed new link road between Springfield Road and Junction 5 has been put back, ostensibly because of rising costs, but mainly because there's no need for it, as drivers will use the new Orrs Road. If there is ever a need for a new connection between the 77 and the easiest and Barhead, the easiest way to do that would create a diamond junction at Junction 4 onto the enhanced Orrs Road. which would probably cost less and enough less disruption to the natural habitat, thereby helping mitigate climate change. But my question is, when does the Country Park or road scheme go ahead? And when is the proposed start date, and how long will the road be closed for through traffic? And secondly, although I'm not a civil engineer, the cost of the new station does seem to me quite excessive. I would look at some of the figures for Rob Royston station, and whilst the initial projected cost was around 10 million for the whole project, it ended up costing 14 million, or 40% more. And if the same were to happen at our new station, then that could end up costing council taxpayers an extra 7.5 million. And I'm quite sure the City Deal Cabinet would not be stumping up for the extra. And I also noticed that the Rob Royston project was jointly funded by Transport Scotland's New Station Fund, SPT, Network Rail, and a few others alongside Glasgow City Council. So why are we paying for the whole lot ourselves, albeit through City Deal? And as chair of the Audit and Scrutiny Committee, I noticed in the news yesterday that Dumfries and Galloway Council had initiated an anti-fraud review regarding public works. So the above costs do give me some cause for concern. But as mentioned, I do welcome the new station, but not at any cost. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Miller. You had a few questions there about start dates and costs and whatever. It might be helpful if maybe Mr Cahill could update us and the answers to those before we take any other questions, or Councillor Buchanan, whoever wants to respond to it. Councillor Buchanan, do you want to answer?
I can certainly come in. I'll get Mr Cahill to come in with the start dates for the roadworks, etc. Although obviously it will be over a period of time, but we are looking to get started as soon as possible, given the improvements that are scheduled. I think what's worth, we did have a significant discussion at Cabinet on this paper, and I think it was a thorough discussion. I note that Councillor Miller has indicated the costs of Rob Royston Station, which was factored in to the costings that we put forward for the station in Barrhead. We all know that there have been increases, and we will be subject to that at the moment. It's believed that we're currently looking at, for a variety of reasons, both as we come out of COVID, hopefully, and indeed Brexit, that construction costs have increased by some 30%. So there is concerns around those figures, and obviously they have been looked at, and we try to cover costs as much as we can. But again, I've no doubt that discussions at government level will continue with a view to taking those issues on board. I'm sure they've all, in essence, I think the report itself, it's recommended that we focus now on delivering the revised enhanced projects in relation to the new rail station at Barrhead and Ors Road Improvement Project, and Damsty Darnley as a whole, and especially the visitor facilities. Anyone who's been to the dams recently will know the huge volume of people who are using it, who are using the water for free swimming, etc. So I think the sooner that we can get those projects up and running, the better. The attached artists' impressions, I'm sure, will impress everyone. They make a significant difference to the area, and importantly, ensure that the road itself is made significantly safer than it has been, than it ever has been in many respects. And we all know the concerns that most of us have had over the years about that particular road. So all in all, I think it's an excellent report. It highlights the work that has been done and will continue to be done. And I'm happy to pass over to Mr Cahill to give us an idea of some of the dates.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Buchanan. Could I get that information from Mr Cahill, then I'll go to Councillor Lafferty next.
Happy to advise, Provost. As Councillor Buchanan has said, this has been a complete review of all our projects. They've been enhanced and revised and developed. There's interrelationships between them all. On the new rail station, the Rob Royston one's the first one where we've actually been able to benchmark properly. In due course, we'll have discussions with Transport Scotland, but the difference is that this project, as you pointed out, Councillor Miller, is funded through City Deal, whereas I understand the other ones weren't. So it may have been a Transport Scotland initiative. And I think the issue is it's the council that's pushing for this one, not Transport Scotland. Once the prices come back, then I will do a value engineering exercise, as they call it, to see how much we can scale back without detrimental without being detrimental to the quality of the facility. In terms of timescales, the cost for the railway station is based on construction start date of 2023. Sorry, just fix my screen. The Country Park visitor facilities is based upon a start date of 2023 because it's dependent on the Orrs Road being completed first. The Orrs Road improvements are scheduled for a start date of spring 2022. But what I was going to say was, I've mentioned this before, but this is the first opportunity I've really had to draw all this stuff together. And I'm sure you appreciate the magnitude of some of the things that are going on. But I intend to report back to the council or to the cabinet and then to the council if that's appropriate before any of those projects are actually let, because I want the council elected members to be fully involved in understanding what those projects are, what the implications are. So I won't be letting any of them before reporting back to the council, so you'll get a chance to see them again. I hope that answers your questions.
Yes, it does. Thank you very much, and thanks, Tony. But also thanks for speaking to us and giving us a phone and letting me know about it. I appreciated it.
Okay, you're welcome.
Okay, thank you for that. Can I call in Councillor Lafferty, then Councillor Wallace after him? Councillor Lafferty.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. You should probably know me. If anybody mentions trains and stations, that usually sparks me into interest. I think a particular point about the station, the new station at Auchenbach or Barhead South or whatever it's going to be called, is the fact that I think the contributing factor to the increase in the cost was ensuring the building of lifts and a bridge that would give disabled access, much enhanced for walking from travelling from one side of the park to the other. I think that, and not forgetting perhaps making their way to the refreshments in the what do you call it, cafe type place what we'll have up there. I know they had to cut back the prices, the spend on it. That's unfortunate, but I think it was a sensible thing to do. But I'm delighted to see a proper station being built at Barhead South, Auchenbach or whatever. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Lafferty. Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Provost. Just quite surprised at the level of congratulations that are being flying around, given we're a budget there of £8 million for a station, which is now going to be £18 million. You know, I'm kind of reminded of ferries down Greenock Way, you know, the Glen Sanics and such like, which started off relatively modest costs and just escalated from there. So we've gone from 8 to 18. Can we perhaps suspect maybe get 36 by the time this is all over? And who knows when it will be all over. However, I don't wish to appear totally negative. The other comment I do have in terms of, there's two things as far as cost is concerned. One is, it was interesting in the cabinet meeting about a month ago or so, in which City Deal was mentioned, and straight after the City Deal was talk of the adoption of the Glasgow City Region Climate Adaptation Strategy and Action Plan, which was to do with planting somewhere in the region of 18 million trees to offset the environmental damage that we are doing. And when you actually look at the pictures and the graphics of this City Deal at Orrs Road, etc., all I see is concrete and cars. And I just want to question what the environmental impact of all this is going to be. And I don't believe that people nowadays, when they're looking at these things, can just see it in terms of pounds, shillings and pence. It's actually the impact it's going to have on our natural environment. Just one last thing. Part of the funding for this was going to be £1 million taken from developer funds. Can I ask, is that £1 million that's going to be taken away from elsewhere, that someone else is going to have to find £1 million that would normally have taken receipt of that, of these developer funds? Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Well, do you want to gather up that while you're thinking about an answer for that? I guess Mr. Cahill, can I call in Councillor Swift, who's waiting to speak?
Thank you, Provost. Couple of questions. Again, I would like to raise the issue of the costs of the train station. How much was the new IJB building that employs hundreds of people, or hundreds of people work there? I think there are 3 or 4 GP practices. It's an enormous facility. I think it was about 25 million or something like that. And you know, for Councillor Lafferty to suggest that it will cost £10 million more for a lift, sounds quite, or 2 lifts, one at either side, sounds a bit kind of ridiculous to me. I do accept that inflation is rising. I do accept that building costs can increase, and I accept there is a good analogue now in Glasgow. But I do have some huge concerns. I mean, we've seen the cost of the leisure centre go kind of vertical as well. We do need to be better at forecasting costs as a council. I think that's really important. So I have a couple of questions. I mean, when the original building was proposed, and I am pleased to see the building is completed for the business incubator, because remember, it's not just office space, it was built as a business incubator. Can I ask how many businesses have signed up for the incubator, and what support has been put in place to help incubate these businesses, which was the primary function? And let's not forget that this is a key plank that sits within the economic growth for East Renfrewshire. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to pick up all these questions, Mr. Cahill?
I'll try my best, Provost. I'm trying to write them. There's a lot of questions in there. With regard to the comments about the rather stark utilitarian artist's impression of the railway station, of course that's something that we'll take on board. I'll be looking at tree planting within East Renfrewshire anyway, as part of our wider adaptation sustainability strategy that's currently being prepared. In terms of being better at forecasting, yes, I do take on board those comments, but have to remember some of these schemes began to get originated in 2014-15, and so many things have changed in so many ways, and without adding to the process. In terms of section 16, I have explained some of the background about why we believe that the station costs have risen. In relation to green law, we have been maintaining contact with the businesses. The problem is just now that we're allowing National Health Service to use it as a testing facility, given the urgency and the requirements that they need to do that type of stuff. We've been trying to keep in contact with the various businesses. We've gone back to them, and as we sort out with NHS about the possible relocation of their premises to somewhere else, then I'll be looking to bring green law back into functionality as occupied office accommodation. However, there are things that I have to take on board. I won't bore you with the detail tonight, but there are things like social distancing guidelines and whatever that will be subject to Scottish Government announcement, and that will have potentially have an impact on how we reoccupy that office. So it's all in the mix just now, but I hope to be able to get it operational as soon as circumstances allow me to do it. Is there anything I've missed?
You okay with that, Councillor Swift? And yep.
I think it's as good an answer as I can expect, given the circumstances.
Okay, thank you for that. Councillor Lafferty, are you wanting to come in again? Your hand's still up. No. No. And you're on mute. Councillor Wallace, your hand's up too. Do you want to come back in?
No, just to question the response in terms of the environmental impact and my comments on concrete and cars, etc. I did find the response a little bit kind of offhand and kind of churlish, if you like. It is a very important factor, and I do get concerned when I see around me the amount of damage that we are doing to our environment under the banner of improvements. But anyway, I've had a response, so I'll take it as it is. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wallace. Councillor Buchanan, your hand's up.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Just to come back in terms of some of the climate aspects, what is noticeable about the strengthening and the straightening of the road is it makes it more amenable to public transport. One of the things that we've looked at on numerous occasions is to get public transport between Mearns and Barrhead. And at the moment, one, there's a lack of the station, but two, there's also the inability to have buses travel the route because of the weak bridge. That will be fixed, so therefore there'll be a significant improvement in the public transport aspect, which should hopefully start to move towards better climate outcomes. The other aspect, of course, is that the road itself isn't just the straightening of the road, it's the addition of the footpath and cycleways, which will hopefully encourage more people to utilise other forms of transport, which are, one, better for health-wise, and two, better for the environment. And I think that's important as well in terms of the fixing or the straightening of that road. So it's an all-inclusive picture which does start to improve the overall well-being and access points across the authority.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Buchanan. Are there any other questions on the paper? No. Councillor Grant? No. Right, can we approve that paper? Thank you.
Approved.
And move on to item number 6, which is statements by conveners or representatives from joint boards. I do believe there's a statement from Councillor Bamforth from the IGB this evening. Councillor Bamforth.
Thank you, Chair. The Integration Board met on Wednesday, 23rd of June. The focus of the meeting was in finance, with our Chief Financial Officer presenting the unaudited annual report and accounts and the medium-term financial plan. There are some financial challenges ahead, in particular because of the increased demand we are facing across the HSCP. We also discussed the Child Poverty Action Plan, which is on tonight's agenda, so you'll all read it there and hear how the pandemic has and will continue to have an impact on the outcome for local families. We concluded with an update on the performance and the Health and Social Care Partnerships Recovery and Renewal Programme. Finally, we were able to thank Candy Millard for her significant contribution to health and social care in East Renfrewshire over the past 15 years, and we all wish Candy a happy and healthy retirement. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Here, here.
Sure, we'd all echo that, those of us who've worked with Candy over a period of time. Could I call in Councillor Merrick? I think it's a couple of reports this evening. Councillor Merrick.
Thank you, Provost. The first one is for the Culture and Leisure Trust and about the recovery. So from sports and physical activity, the Culture and Leisure recovery continues. Swimming lessons have recommenced and the indoor fitness classes have also recommenced, and that allows us to collect membership fees again. The Eastwood High School Sports Centre is reopening for groups and clubs. In the meantime, we eagerly await the revised guidance for operations. The previous government guidance was November past, and that'll allow us to further remove restrictions for customers. Mass vaccination continues to be supported at Eastwood Park and Barhead Foundry, with planning for a transition from culture and leisure staff to volunteer staffing continuing. That's well underway. Library and information services, 7 libraries are currently open and are operating under reduced opening hours. Planning is underway for the remaining 3 libraries, which are Busby, Netherley and Uplaw Moor, and for the removal of the temporary opening hours across the service. Busby Library is currently closed for refurbishment and is expected to reopen again in August. There's no firm date for the restoration of the normal opening hours, but it is likely that it will align with the expected removal of the tier system and associated restrictions in August. In the meantime, the summer reading programme, which is always exceptionally popular in East Renfrewshire, began last week. Enrichment programme with HSCP in April, the Trust launched a pioneering programme of activities for vulnerable young people who have been especially affected during lockdown. Working with colleagues in social work, culture and leisure staff have created dedicated sessions that include film club, virtual reality experiences, cookery, archery, trampolining, dance and drama, hill walking and swimming. And I'm sure Councillor Grant was wanting me to say fencing in there. I just say not yet. In May, Pulse FM broadcast a set from 2 of the young people who have participated in the DJing class, if anybody is into that particular genre of music. The summer holiday programme is now booked and will go live next week at sites across the authority, and provision has been further enhanced as part of the government's Get Into Summer programme for young people. Finally, the Theatre Skills course. While the theatre is still closed, we've developed an SQA accredited Technical Theatre in Practice course in partnership with the Education Department and St Luke's High School. This course covers legislation and practice, design, sound operations, lighting operations, and a creative practical project and will go live in the new academic year. And that covers the update for the culture and leisure activities and recovery. Just a very brief statement on the Education Committee, which last met on the 10th of June. The committee considered the Early Learning and Childcare Annual Report and the very effective implementation of 1,140 hours of early learning and childcare from August 2020. We discussed the progress that has been with the developing the young workforce in East Renfrewshire and approved an updated plan for 2021 to 22, which takes account of the impact of the pandemic on employment. In addition, the committee considered an assessment against the recommendations contained in the Improving Outcomes for Young People Through School. That was a report prepared by Audit Scotland. And we concluded with an update on how children's rights were currently respected and embedded within East Renfrewshire, as well as future actions in this area. Finally, and lastly, and by no means least, we were able to thank Fiona Morrison, who's one of our heads of service, was one of our heads of service, for her outstanding contribution to education in East Renfrewshire over the past 25 years. And I'm sure we all wish Fiona a happy, healthy and long retirement. Thank you.
Hear, hear.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Merrick. And again, I echo the comments about Fiona, as with Candy. Many of us have known her for 25 years and been very grateful for her help and advice over that period. So I'm sure we all wish her well in her retirement. Can I now move on to item number 7, which is appointments? And I think you've had a list of changes here which have been circulated to everybody. But I will pass over to Councillor Buchanan to speak to this, and if there's any issues or whatever or clarification needed, perhaps Mr Daly can update us all, because I know there's been a few late changes. But Councillor Buchanan first. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Provost. It's just to make one amendment to the list that has been circulated, and that's in terms of the Licensing Committee Board, and that's to add Councillor Ireland's name as the candidate for that post. Obviously, the appointments have come about by Councillor O'Kane's success in being elected to Holyrood, so congratulations to him on that. And obviously the other appointments are in terms of yourself, Provost, and Councillor Lafferty and Councillor Cunningham, and the movements that are required accordingly within that, and that covers the bulk of the appointments that are required. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Everybody comfortable with that? Councillor MacDonald, your hands up.
Yes, thanks, Provost. I noticed that there was one other vacancy on that list. Just pulling it up here. Sorry, 2 seconds here. Yep. So it's taking a second to open it up. There was one other appointment. I don't have my reading glasses all of a sudden. It was for the Clyde and Loch Lomond local plan. There seems to be a vacancy on there. If nobody else is so inclined to fill that, I'd be happy to put myself forward to fill that if need be.
Okay, I mean, Councillor Buchanan.
My understanding was that we had an appointment on that, and I know that Councillor Ireland was interested in that, but I think it was initially a post, and I'm not sure if Councillor Cunningham was taking that on as part of an environment role.
Provost, can I maybe suggest that we carry that one over, and I'll just look into that just to confirm whether or not there is a vacancy, and if that's the case, I can bring it back to the next meeting.
Okay, if you're comfortable with that, Councillor MacDonald will...
That's absolutely fine, Provost.
Okay. Councillor Miller.
Thanks, Provost. I hear what Councillor Buchanan is saying about Councillor Ireland joining the licensing board, which I welcome. Somebody else coming on there. Do you have any idea how long it will take to do the training and pass the exam?
Provost, I could maybe come in there. I will get in touch with Mr Abrami tomorrow just to confirm Councillor Ireland's appointment and just seek clarification on how long it will take for him to arrange any training that's required for Councillor Ireland to sit on the board.
Thanks, Damon.
Okay, any other points? Can we accept that paper? Sorry, Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Provost. No, it's just to say, I mean, if ever the evidence was needed as to how under-resourced we are as a council, it's right there in front of us. And Councillor Kane's success at Holyrood, which we all congratulate him on, well deserved. But that aside, in terms of in losing one councillor, the impact that it does have as a full council. And I do know that with the changes that were made, we lost 2 councillors. We have 18 in East Renfrewshire instead of the original 20. So, and I know there's a paper coming up just shortly after this, which refers to it as well. But I would just like to think, I don't know what influence our leader perhaps has to try and bring some pressure, particularly next year where we've got our next set of elections coming up. What pressure can be brought to bear in the powers that be? Because, and another thing in this paper is our increasing population that we have. So, as I say, we are extremely under-resourced, and councillors, each councillor has an awful lot on their plates, and everybody's trying to do the best that they possibly can. So I would ask the leader of the council to please voice our concerns. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wallace. I would just add my own tuppence worth as the former leader. I mean, we did have all-party unanimity, including even the independent group, to argue for more councillors rather than fewer councillors, and it was obviously a decision of the Boundary Committee. We would have needed to go down the road of judicial review. And I don't think there was much appetite to take the risk for that. But what was for me very disappointing was the lack of support from our MSP colleagues from all the parties when it was debated at Holyrood. So I also think there is a real role for us to speak to MSP colleagues and to really ask them to put pressure on the Boundary Commission, because you know, the idea that social deprivation should determine the number of councillors seems to be utterly bizarre, and it wouldn't happen in the rest of the UK in a million years. I mean, can you imagine if they changed the Westminster constituencies based on that formula? I mean, all hell would break loose. So, you know, it seems to be bizarre that the Boundary Commission did that, but there is a role, I think, very much for our MSP colleagues here. Okay, Councillor O'Kane, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Provost. I suppose listening very acutely to what you said there about MSP colleagues, think you are right, and Councillor Wallace is right to make the point about the challenges we've had since going down in number of councillors, and certainly I will do all I can now and in the future to raise that issue. But really, I was just coming in, Provost, to say thank you to colleagues for their very kind words and communications upon my election to the Scottish Parliament, and also thank you to colleagues who are taking on new and additional roles tonight. I certainly will continue to play a very full role in this forum through full council and indeed through all my constituency work in the ward. But I think politics aside, we've always tried to be a really collegiate council. And just thank you to colleagues for being so obliging and so supportive.
Okay, thank you, Councillor O'Kane. And I should have said at the start to congratulate you in your elevation, if that's the right word, to a better place. I think we're all delighted. Don't want to create any political controversy, but I'm sure we're all delighted when we see one of our own at council level being elected to either MP or MSP. So well done. Councillor Buchanan.
Thanks, Provost. Yeah, just to echo some of the comments made in relation to council numbers, I think as we all previously agreed, we didn't agree with the reduction from 20 down to 18. In fact, I would suggest that we probably should now have around 22 councillors to cover the population of the authority. And although that there is no review scheduled for councillor numbers, I'm certainly more than happy to continue to raise the issue and press forward that As a minimum, I would suggest that each authority should have at least 20 councillors. We have highlighted the volume of work involved for all councillors, and I think that certainly stands as in good testament to show that greater numbers of councillors are required. The population that we have is continuing to increase. That in itself should allow for an increased number of councillors, for increased representation. And I'm certainly more than happy to continue pushing that and looking to find ways that, despite there not being a review, to try and find a methodology that would suggest that we should be able to move forward and try and progress the issues that have been raised and that we raised, I think, very well previously, despite not deciding to go to judicial review. I think we had a very good case. We know that the numbers in terms of deprivation are now out, and I don't believe that that would show that we should have 18. I think that we should look at those, and I would suggest again that we should have an increased number of councillors for the size of our authority.
Thank you, Councillor Buchanan. As I say, I'm sure that's one that the council will return to in the future. Okay, can we approve that?
Sorry, I did have my hand up. I did, honest, I did.
I'm not sure if you're waving at me or you're just wanting your hand up.
Well, I did press the button, but there you go. I just wanted to say, when I was still a member of COSLA's representation in Europe on the Committee of the Regions, certainly one of the things I have mentioned before, and it was pointed out in the Europe, that we were the most poorly represented for our communities when it comes to representation of councillors. And it was quite sad, really, that the number of councillors that we have per councillor compared to the way they work in Europe. It's a hell of a difference, I tell you. And it's very, very bad that we are in a situation where we don't have enough people really to do justice to what the community needs are. So I hope that somewhere along the line we'll get back to a representation that will be more meaningful. I won't be part of it, but that's another story altogether. At least I hope that we get to the correct number of people that we should have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Grant. Councillor MacDonald, your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out just a comparison to draw regarding talking about population differences between different council areas. Stirling Council, as an example, is ranked at 24th. We are currently 23rd. They have a population roughly about 94,000 and they have 23 councillors at present. So they have 5 more than us and they have approximately about the same population. So I struggle to understand how the Boundary Commission came to these conclusions with certain councils being penalised like our council in terms of the amount of elected members that we have comparative to the population that we have. And yet you look at Stirling Council and they have a representation of 5 more councillors for an exact similar population. It just doesn't equate to me.
I think we would all agree with you, Councillor MacDonald, and it's not as if Stirling Council is the hotbed of deprivation in Scotland, so you know, there's no obvious logic to it. However, as I say, I've no doubt the council will return to that in the future. We're slightly off topic in the paper, but can I approve the paper anyway? Thank you. And could I then move on to item number 8, which is the amendment to the Appointments Committee, and we're seeking homologation to the appointment of myself to actually sit in one of the committees and how we take this forward in the future. But I think there's a slight amendment to the paper, so could I call Councillor Buchanan in that one?
Yeah, thanks very much, Provost. Yeah, in terms of the first part of the paper is the homologation of the Appointments Committee decision based on a head of service within the Education Department, and that's the first part of it, and hopefully everyone can agree with that homologation. The second part is an issue that's raised in the paper in terms of the Appointments Committee. One of the things, and thankfully it hasn't happened previously, but it did on this occasion, that given the circumstances we were in, and as we've just had a discussion on both the combination, I think, of the pandemic, the lack of councillor numbers, and the pressure of work that everyone has, caused a set of circumstances which meant that we had to rearrange some of the appointments committee meetings and the scheduling of the interviewing. And that in itself doesn't put out a good image in terms of ensuring that we have a schedule of meetings that we can equate to. In this instance, it worked out and we were able to manage it. And we had previously yourself, Provost, in terms of the homologation, both for the first part of the appointments committee and indeed for the final decision-making process and interview process. So although it worked in our favour, it did highlight an issue, primarily around the pressure of work and primarily around the difficulties that presents for officers who are trying to schedule appointments, schedule the interview process. And that could have been significantly worse in terms of timing and scheduling than it turned out to be. That said, I know that it's important that we have elected member involvement in the appointment of senior officers. And although I know that a number of councils don't have elected member involvement for heads of service, I think it's something that we are used to. But what we do need to realise is that as an appointments committee, that you are taking on a very important role, and it's vital that when we put our names forward and we convene appointments committees, that members make sure they can be available for the schedule that's put forward, because it's vital not only for the good standing of the council, but for those who are applying for those posts as well, to ensure that the timetables are being met. On that basis, I would disagree with part of it and suggest that the amendment should be that we continue with the status quo in terms of our current rules and regulations surrounding the appointments committee, but that we add in that at the convening of an appointments committee, should it be required between now and the end of term in May, that we allocate substitutes as well to ensure that one, removes the needs, if you like, or the requirement for homologation of papers, but two, and perhaps more importantly, ensures that we keep to the published timetable in respect of any post that may be advertised and that we may be interviewing for. Hopefully, colleagues will be able to agree with that, and that we can move forward in the current set of circumstances.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Buchanan, for that clarification. Councillor Wallace.
You're on mute. Mute.
You're on mute, Councillor Wallace.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just to say thank you, first of all, to yourself, Provost, for having taken on that role on the Appointments Committee at such short notice. If I can just take one small thing that the leader mentioning there about people putting their names forward, must make sure that they do attend these Appointments Committee. Absolutely, there's no question about it. I don't believe there's a councillor here that wouldn't try and endeavour to be at every Appointments Committee that they possibly can. But as I'm sure the leader will know, these don't come up in a natural form. You don't know at the beginning of the year what the appointments are going to be. So just to underline that, I'm sure every member here makes a point of trying to prioritise these appointments, and I do fully appreciate how that looks outside if you're coming forward for interview and all of a sudden it's cancelled at short notice, and then people begin to question, well, how important do they look upon my position here? I'm grateful also, I would say, to the leader that you have decided to keep this going, that we are elected members will be a part of making sure that we have input for appointing heads of service. I did feel when the paper came through originally that we were going to lose that role was not of benefit to the democratic process and us being able to be representative of all the community. So thank you for that. Certainly, I see no problem with how it's been put forward now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Wallace. Councillor Miller.
Thanks, Provost. It's not often I can say this. I agree with the leader, but in this particular instance, I definitely agree that it's a good idea to put forward substitutes, and if they are needed, they should be there as well.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Miller. Are we all content with the paper as amended by Councillor Buchanan? Can we accept that then? Thank you very much. And move on to item number 9, Provost engagements, which is for noting. Not much to note, I have to say. Item number 10, the General Fund Capital Programme. The report is looking for amendments to the General Fund Capital Programme. And as you'll know, this normally goes to the Cabinet first before going to Council, but it's not been possible in this instance because of timing issues, and it obviously includes some of the city deal changes which we've already approved earlier this evening. But it's really there for any questions that anybody may have on it. Councillor Ireland.
Thank you, Provost. There's mention on, I don't have the page number, I do apologise, but it is mentioned as part of it that there are works that are listed as priority works, and I completely understand that. These need to be put, especially within the last year. But I did note that it states that window programmes for Carrollside, St Luke's and Wood Farm will be deferred and subsequently funded from future years' provisional sums balance. I would just like an indication of when it was anticipated that these works might be put back in the programme again, and if we had any date in mind, I'd be very interested in learning it, because I do think those window works programmes really need to be carried on.
Yep, thank you, Councillor Ireland. I agree, it's a very important point. Councillor Wallace.
Thank you, Provost. I don't know, we can maybe bundle these queries together. Just get 2 or 3 here. First of all, the costs that we incurred over the last 15 months or so in making all our buildings safe, if you like, COVID safe. Curious to know whether that the costs involved there came out the capital fund or whether that was revenue. If it did come out the capital fund, as to whether or not, to what extent we are still owed funds from Scottish Government to cover that. Second point I'd like to make is I actually raised it with the City Fund. Unfortunately, it wasn't answered, and that was to do with developer contributions. It was just to see that it was 1.23 million, which I believe is to go towards the Orge Road to help facilitate that. It was just to find out who is losing out there, who's not getting the 1.23 million that would have ordinarily received that. And finally, if I could, it's just on page, sorry, just bear with me. Yes, it's on page 48, and it refers to the Eastwood Park Leisure. At that time, it was referred to as refurbishment. As we know, the proposal is no longer for refurbishment, it's for something quite different. But it's still marked in there at 26 million when I believe, I'm sure probably in September time, we'll have a paper in front of us talking about 50 million. Any particular reason as to why there's been no changes or in the general fund, or do we have to actually wait for agreement from councillors before that goes ahead? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. Are there any other questions? And I'll try and, as I say, group them before they're answered. I don't see any other hands up. Okay. There's obviously, I suspect, covering a few areas in terms of any officer responses here. Firstly, Mr. Cahill, do you want to deal with some of the specifics from your area? And I don't know if our finance people can deal with some of the finance issues. I'm looking to see any hands up here. Thank you. Mr. Cahill first.
Thanks, Provost. In terms of the question about the windows, as I understand it, the difficulty is through the supply chain to actually get windows. So the answer to your question is, yes, we still want to do it. We want to do it as soon as possible, but there's so much uncertainty and difficulty in the whole supply chain in the market just now. I would be hopeful, and with a good wind behind us, that they will be done next year. So moving on, in terms of things that I could answer, I'm conscious that I didn't answer the question about development contributions. No one is going to lose out on that. What we do is we collect development contributions under various themes. As development continues, they go into a general pot and they're distributed out in consultation with other departments as to the various categories that those funds are held under. So, for example, open spaces, parks, libraries, education. So the developer contributions will be those that are specific to that area around the country park. So it's a purely, absolutely legitimate use of those development contributions. So nobody will get penalised or anything taken away from them. It's just how we apply those amassed development contributions in that particular area for the country park and its associated infrastructure. And I think probably Mrs McCrossan might be better placed to answer some of the other questions.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Cahill. I'm just going to call in Mrs McCrossan now. Thank you. I see your hand up, Mrs McCrossan.
Yes, thanks, Provost. I think the other question I had taken note of there was on the Eastwood Leisure, and the total cost for that scheme is still shown as the 26 million. Councillor Wallace is right. We are not yet certain of the exact cost until we have a bit more detail. We agreed that we would take forward examination of the option that was likely to be up to 55, but we haven't got defined amounts yet for the forward years there. Although when we did do our 10-year capital plan, we did all our financial modelling on the basis of a 55 million spend. So that has been factored into our funding assumptions. But as you'll see, this report here at the moment is only talking about the spend in the year 21-22. So we're only really focusing on the initial 4 million at this point. But you will see, you're right, eventually the right-hand columns will move up once we've got a bit more clarity on the total.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Any other questions or points? Can we approve that report? Thank you very much. And moving on to the Housing Capital Programme, we don't have Councillor Devlin here this evening, unfortunately. But are there any questions or problems on the Housing Capital Programme, or can we approve that? All okay with it? Thank you. Moving on to item number 12, which is the Local Child Poverty Action Report. This report to Council is a requirement under the Child Poverty Scotland Act, and we're looking for approval and permission to publish the report here this evening. The report has already been looked at by the IJB on the 23rd of June, but it's here this evening for any questions that anybody may have. So I'll open the floor to you. Councillor Ireland.
Thank you very much, Provost. It was one item that I wanted to ask a question on. It was regarding, because I know this will make an absolute huge difference to employees who get this, and it was the work that's been done on the living wage. I wanted to say a huge thank you to the economic development team. I think Business Gateway are working on it, and local employability partners they've got here. I think they've done a power of work, because I noticed that even though the year that we've had, that we've actually increased the number of living wage businesses by quite a percentage. So I just want to say a huge thank you to them, first of all, for doing that. I did notice that they were talking about establishing an East Renfrewshire Living Wage Action Group. And my question was, has that been established, and who will be on that group? Who is it that's actually going to be sitting on that?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ireland. Is there anybody can advise in the composition of that group? I'll leave that with you, calling Councillor Wallace first.
Thank you, Provost. Page 89, the infographics are, I have to say, they're very good and very easy to read. and but just kind of deciphering some of them is maybe a little more difficult. It's very useful when we get these figures compared to the Scottish averages, because it does give us an idea as to where we stand. But some of them were missing, I would say, from there, so it was difficult to compare. However, page 89, I felt quite an extraordinary statistic there, is that those living in East Renfrewshire received the highest weekly wage in Scotland. And yet, by contrast, those working in East Renfrewshire received the lowest average weekly pay in Scotland, which I find quite extraordinary. And the concern is, now I take on what Councillor Ireland is saying about the living wage, and I know we're all on board to ensure that that does happen, and everything that the council is doing to try and push that forward. But I'm slightly concerned. We do have, and I can understand why, we do have a policy in terms of procurement that we make sure that those that we are purchasing from are making sure that their employees do have a living wage. And yet here we have that something like, what is it? Yeah, 30. Yeah, the average number of employees over 18 earning less than the living wage in East Renfrewshire, it's 31%, when the Scottish average is 15%. What I'm trying to get at here is, if we have a policy which says that we will only purchase from those who are paying out the living wage, then it's a bit of a chicken and egg here, I appreciate that, but are we then cutting out a huge number of local businesses that could be supplying the council but cannot do because of the living wage, and therefore cannot get sufficient income to help pay for the living wage? If you see where I'm coming from there. Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Sorry, I should end that with a question rather than just an observation. The question being, how do we overcome that? As I say, it's chicken and egg. We really need to give business to these local businesses. We need to procure from them and help them get to the situation in which they can pay at least the living wage. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wallace. We'll check it if anybody has the information on who these companies are that are not paying the living wage, or the reasons for it, etc., etc. Are there any other questions? And no. Yep, sorry, Mr. Cahill, do you want to come in on some of the questions that have been posed there? Thank you.
So interesting observations. I don't have the information about the composition of the living wage group or whether it's been established yet, but I will get back to Councillor Ireland on that as soon as we possibly can. In relation to the internally paid wages, if you could call it that, for within East Renfrewshire Council, and the wages for people who are working outside East Renfrewshire Council, the disparity is because of the nature of the jobs that exist within East Renfrewshire Council area. Mainly they're retail and hospitality type jobs in those sectors, and they're lower paid jobs. So that's the reason for that. Most of the other high earners are actually travelling out of the council area to go and work in higher paid jobs in Glasgow for whatever those jobs might be. It's also a valid point about procurement. It's something that I've been looking at with the procurement manager recently. We do have supplier chain events for various businesses. Councillor to comment on that, where we try to set them up and train them and enable them to be able to bid for local contracts. But again, some of the issues is that we don't actually have businesses within the council area that could supply some of the procurement requirements of the council. I noticed also, I think the procurement manager might be on the Teams meeting, and I don't know if she is and wants to come in. It's something that we're working on to try to get the numbers up and try to encourage and establish start-up businesses that would be able to supply the council in terms of its procurement requirements. And that then, as Councillor Wallace points out quite rightly, has an implication for that company earning money and being able to pay them. So it's kind of circular.
Thank you, Mr. Cahill. I see, I'll call Councillor Buchanan, but I'll see the hand up for Debbie Hill, steel as was. Debbie, do you want to make a contribution in this?
Thank you, Provost. It was really just to support what Mr. Cahill has just said there. We have had a Twitter takeover event, which you might be interested to hear about, whereby
We worked with lots of local suppliers, really to understand their business needs and help them get tender ready. So we will continue to do work of this nature and really try and understand how we can support them more through the sort of procurement activities. And that was all from me, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councillor Buchanan.
Yeah, it was just to echo the comments that Mr. Cahill and Debbie has made. There is an organisation that's been around for some years, and I've sat on the board of it for some years, and indeed used to chair it, the Supplier Development Programme. And we've now expanded significantly across Scotland. It's local authority led, and the purpose of it is to effectively provide training courses and get smaller businesses to sign up to it in order to get them, as Debbie said, tender ready, that they can bid for local government contracts, for public sector contracts, that they can club together in order to obtain some of these contracts, rather than, if you like, much bigger, more significant organisations that would come in, take over the contracts and then sublet. The ideal scenario is that we get local procurement to the stage where they are tender ready, are able to bid, know how to bid and go through that process for all of the public sector contracts, including local government, that may be available. So that work has been going on. It's improved significantly. The numbers are now in the thousands, so it has made a significant difference across many authorities. But as has also been touched on, it depends on the businesses in the area. Hence the reason for our business unit in Mearns, which will hopefully start to attract new businesses, entrepreneurs. We do have an issue that for years, perhaps, people who are entrepreneurial in spirit and mind, who are setting up businesses, often go into our neighbouring authorities to work, but still live here. What we need to try and do is create the facility for them to retain their business in the area, and work is obviously ongoing to try and do that. So yes, it is a combination of things. It is, to some extent, kind of chicken and egg, what do you put in place first? But I can assure everyone, and our team has highlighted, that we are putting in place as many measures as possible to try and support that in terms of our local economy.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wallace? No, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I take on board what the leader's saying there, but just one last thing. Apparently, we're around about 12th or so in terms of all local authorities in paying local businesses within 30 days of paying off their invoices. I wonder if we can just put a bit more pressure on there to try and make sure that we try and climb up that board. The sooner our local businesses can get paid, then the sooner or the less likely they have to go and get an overdraft and therefore not have to pay money that could actually go to their employees. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank
you. Can I just make a quick point? Is that, if that's all right?
Yeah, who's wanting to speak? I didn't see any hand up.
It's Councillor Aitken.
On you go, yeah.
No, that's fine. I suppose one comment is that the council, as all councils in Scotland, are bound by the EU procurement laws. So you're not able to give jobs to local businesses because you have to leave it open to any business within the European Union. But just a comment, perhaps with Brexit, it might actually create an opportunity for councils in Scotland to actually give jobs to local businesses instead of having to consider a business in Italy or Germany or Southampton or whatever. It might be possible after Brexit for Scottish local authorities to give jobs to local businesses. The second thing was just to say that it's not really a great surprise what Councillor Wallace was saying about wages being high amongst people who live in East Wren, but among workers it's lower. Just sheer economy of scale. The bigger businesses are not necessarily based in East Wren; they're based in Glasgow or elsewhere, or Lanarkshire or Renfrewshire. So it's not really a big surprise to me. And if most of the jobs in East Wren involve restaurants, retail, hospitality, then it's not really any great mystery why the workers in East Wren are paid lower than the national average. It's not any great mystery. That's all.
Okay, thank you very much for that contribution, Councillor Aitken. Councillor MacDonald.
Thanks, Provost. It's just in relation to many colleagues here will know that there are a lot of empty, vacant shop units, particularly in my ward, and it's been a long-standing problem. Whenever something comes up like this, I do my own investigations within the Valuation Joint Board and finding out what the rateable value is and what the rates payable are for some of these units. And from my own professional experience of having owned businesses within the Glasgow city area, the comparative rates payable for a similar sized unit is very often far in advance in East Renfrewshire than what it is in Glasgow for similar sized units. So what I would say to that is it would be great to have the council put a bit more pressure on the joint board down in Paisley, who decides the rateable value for these units. An example was in Clarkston recently. There was a unit there that had been sitting in the main strip of Clarkston shops for best part of about 2 years with its sign up trying to attract somebody to come in, and nobody was taking it because the rates payable were 3 to 4 times what you would pay for a similar size shop unit in, say, an area like Partick in Glasgow. So I think really we need to have a bit more of a constructive debate with the valuation board as to how they come up with these rateable values, because it doesn't seem at all in line with other local authorities.
Okay, thank you, Councillor MacDonald. Okay, there's a number of good points there that have come up, and I'm sure they can all be taken forward. There's much to consider. But nevertheless, in terms of the report, are you content with the report and content that it's published? Okay, thank you. Can we move on to item number 13, which is the strategic end-year performance? So they're really for noting here this evening, but I'm very happy to take any questions that anybody may have. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, thank you, Provost. I'm referred to page 131.26, and I'm very pleased to see that the sickness absence rate has taken quite a dramatic reduction this year, and I acknowledge the COVID figures are not included in these figures, but going down from 10.1 to 8.2 is a considerable drop and is to be welcomed. Can I ask if there's a particular reason for these better figures? And secondly, on page 157, the final paragraph, the average time for working days full response to complaints is pretty poor, where out of 4 targets, we only achieve 1 green, 1 amber and 2 reds. And even where there is a green tick, that has risen by almost 2 points. I understand and accept with COVID that we had less staff to handle complaints over the year in comparison to previous years, but there are a good number of people locally who are not satisfied with the 20-day turnaround system, as they are of the opinion, either rightly or wrongly, that the council get the results of their complaint reasonably quickly, but wait until the 18th or 19th day to respond, which on a 20 working day turnaround is basically a month. And some people seem to think that the council has perhaps hoped that the complainant had forgotten all about it, the original complaint. Obviously, I'm not in a position to comment as to accuracy, but can I urge officers to respond as soon as they get an answer to any complaint, and that will help these figures. But more importantly, it will enhance residents' confidence in the council.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Swift.
Thank you, Provost. I would like to come back to also be pleased to see the reduction in sickness absence rates, which is extremely encouraging. And only today in the Times there was a report showing that the average sickness absence has come down from over the same period from 6.1 to 5 days. And we're at 10.1 to 8.2. So there's a hell of a gulf between our performance and the average performance in UK-wide organisations. And I think that's one thing that we probably should take on board. The reason behind the decline from 6.1 to 5.0 was driven apparently by by increased working at home, and that's something that saves on heating, saves on buildings, saves on a whole bunch of other stuff. And people and as we move out of COVID, perhaps we as an organisation could demonstrate a bit more flexibility with employees, so that they have a better working environment, are less inclined to go off on the sick, and maybe we will echo the kind of performance that is seen in an average organisation, which we don't quite manage. One of the other things that strikes me in that report, which I find vaguely worrying, and it's in page 141, is that now we appreciate that we've got a new leisure centre coming, and that will solve all our ills. But leisure activity is down on a year-on-year basis, and it's a trend. And so that's not the one I want to take issue with. It's attendance at libraries. That is a trend that is declining year on year on year. And I wonder if there is a solution to that, if indeed that is a problem. I raise it and have some degree of concern. The last thing I want to raise is that physical activity is also down year on year, including walking. Now, I mean, during the pandemic, it was the one exercise that a lot of people took, but we're still seem to be doing less. And as a society, we should be, or as councillors, we should be concerned that people in our society are exercising less and less, not just at leisure centres, but more generally. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Swift. There's a kind of bunch of questions there. Mrs. Dick, do you want to come in and speak to some of them?
Yes, thanks, Provost. I guess I'll respond to the questions that were raised about absence. So with regards to absence, it obviously has decreased, and I think the question was answered in the comments as well, that it has been decreased as a result of people working from home. So we've had far less flus, colds and gastro complaints, and that's been replicated across the country. So most organisations are seeing that, and that's why our absence has gone down. Councillor Swift also made reference about us being more flexible with our employees. We have been very flexible throughout the pandemic, and we want to continue to do so. So there is a project that has started called The Way We Work, and we are looking to how we can look at people, property and technology through that. And it's to look at how we, change some of get the benefits from what we've gained through the pandemic, but also look to support people as we go forward. Obviously, our absence rate is higher than the national average, and that's because we also have higher numbers of manual employees and also a higher than average age demographic of our employees. But that's not to say we don't continue to look at how we can help and support our employees through any absences they have. I think I think it would be wrong of me not to recognise we are concerned about the mental health and wellbeing of our employees, and I think that is something that all organisations are looking at just now, and I think we do expect to see further increases in our absence again related to that. But we will continue to support employees as much as we can throughout. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mrs. Dick. Councillor Buchanan.
Yeah, thanks very much, Provost. And really just to echo some of the points that Mrs. Dick has just made. The report itself, I think, given the exceptionally challenging year that we've had, is difficult in terms of comparison of figures and values from previous years. I think we have to treat that with caution, as has been highlighted because of the circumstances that we've faced. But I think it's also worth noting that all of our staff, and many working in these circumstances, continue to work hard to maintain the essential services that are being required, such as our school education services, our care at home services, as well as establishing and maintaining new services, working alongside the public sector in general, the voluntary sector, to ensure that people were getting their medical supplies, ensure people were getting food if they were isolating. All of those things brought about new tasks that staff took on readily. And indeed, obviously working and manning vaccination centres and testing centres. All of that has been new tasks that have been added to the bundle. And I think sincere thanks to our staff for doing that over the course of over the last year now. The other aspect in terms of council and HSE's past, they've demonstrated that resilience, and we've heard that in some of the numbers by supporting all of our communities and working alongside them throughout the pandemic. And I think it's important to note those things. Moving forward, absolutely, I know, glad to hear Councillor Swift touching on the wellbeing and the renewal aspects of where we go to next. Hybrid working will no doubt remain with us. Looking at all of those options as we hopefully move out of the pandemic and back to what will be a new normal, there will no doubt be changes in the way that we all view work and well-being, and hopefully we can get the best of that and continue to get the best out of our staff accordingly.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Buchanan. Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, it was on page 145, street cleanliness score. We continue to have our target of 90% in terms of percentage clean, and I see we're over 92% achieving that. It's just to first of all thank our cleanliness people at the Environment Department on their efforts. I certainly know, I think the last 15 months has actually just put a spotlight on how much we value our environment. I mean, the parks have been absolutely superb, extraordinarily well maintained, grass cut. But litter is such an important thing. You see some litter lying around, and it does create an impression of the whole environment. I mean, all you have to do is take a step over the border into Glasgow, and you see something that's a shadow of its former self, with the amount of litter that Glasgow has lying around. And I'd hate to think we'd ever have to drop our standards to what they're putting up with. So I'm just curious as to whether we could maybe see about stepping up our target from 90%, and maybe that 92, 93% should be our target, and try and go for 95. It's such an important factor, and I'm very concerned for the likes of my own ward in Giffnock. We've got a huge amount of takeaway premises, in which I mean, that's a prime target for litter. And to make sure that making sure we've got plenty of bins there, making sure that they are emptied regularly. I wonder if we can just try and step up our target, say from 90% to 95, and let's see how we go on. If nothing else, it'll let the residents know that what we are prioritising, and what we're prioritising here is our local environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. Mr. Ratter, you want to contribute?
Thank you, Provost. It was just to respond to Councillor Swift's question around the libraries. Part of that trend is a result of the shift, I suppose, to sort of virtual online or ebooks, which have remained fairly constant over the last few years. And I suppose that also doesn't take account of the significant work that goes on in things like the summer reading programme, where sort of ahead of population, the library service do extremely well, and they've got very good rates of borrowing like that. So I suppose that particular chart doesn't display the full picture, although it is disappointing that there is that downward trend overall.
Okay, thank you. Councillor MacDonald.
Thanks, Provost. It was just to echo the comments by Councillor Wallace on litter, and it's to do with my own opinions on littering and litter are that it's a societal problem. It's also a psychological problem. I feel that you go to areas that are well maintained and have a really good hand on litter, and you tend to find that the activity of dropping litter is far less than it would be in areas where there are higher prevalence of the activity. So bad behaviour compounds the problem, and vice versa. So I think for us to really get an upper hand on it and to tackle it, because there are problem areas within East Renfrewshire. It's not as glossy as some would say that Glasgow's all bad and East Renfrewshire is much better. There are areas of East Renfrewshire that are real problem areas, and I would like to see the council take a far more stringent approach in terms of tackling it, and I think we've got to try to encourage people that the activity is bad, and I think ultimately that comes down to education at the very youngest level. So I would like to see more support, particularly from the education department, in educating our young people at high schools and primary schools. And going forward, hopefully that will have a positive effect as these people grow into adults and don't take the activity forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor MacDonald. Councillor Wallace, you want back in?
Yeah, just one last thing, and just an observation from page 148. A great concern at that 49% figure, percentage of respondents who agree or strongly agree that they feel a strong sense of belonging to their local community. We used to be achieving up to about 70% or so there, and we've seen a drop to below 50%, which I think is indicative of what the pandemic, the effect it's had on people, and maybe an idea of what the problems that we've stacked up for ourselves and the problems that we're going to have to face in the coming months and coming years to try and get ourselves out of this. But a very significant statistic, I felt, and as I say, just an observation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. As I said, the report is there for comment, and I think there's been a number of very good points made, so I'm sure they'll all be noted, and we will take them forward, I think, in terms of how we can improve the area. And I'm sure there's unanimity that we would all want to live in an East Renfrewshire that we could all be proud of. So can I accept that report? I mean, it's not for approval, but it's there for comment, and move on to item number 14, which is the outcome delivery plan for 2021 to 2024. And I do need this approved here because it is an outcome delivery plan. So it's with you this evening for any comments or observations that you have on it. Councillor Miller.
Thanks once again. I'm sure that I would, more or less like others as well, we find some of these facts very interesting, but there's some of these things that are major concern, and the main one is the projected population increase within the next 20 years. And obviously we've had a real go at the councillor numbers with the increased population, so I'm not going to mention that again. But I know that our primary schools are 87% full at present and secondaries 88%. So where are we going to educate all these extra people? As the chances are they'll not be moving into the areas where they have vacancies. But secondly, and more worryingly, we have projected figures of 3,374 new houses within the next 8 years, and the possibility of up to another possibly 5,000 houses in the following 10 years. As members will remember, we in the Audit and Scrutiny Committee did an investigation into the effect of councils having climate change. And amid the current clamour about climate change, my concern is that we in East Renfrew do not have the lot of brownfield sites left, that if we were to grant planning permission for so many more units, we would have to allow much more development in greenfield sites, which would exacerbate climate change. And with the Scottish Government's stated intention of planting millions of trees, an increase, I think it was 18 million trees was mentioned earlier on, an increasing amount of land being given over to leisure facilities and pursuits, we'll have to be very careful that we still have enough productive land left to feed our population in future years, because it will not be sustainable to import food from all over the world. But obviously this is maybe me as a farmer talking.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Miller. Note those comments from the farming community. Any other comments or observations? Nope. See any hands? Can we accept that report then and move on to item 16, which is the community plan?
Provost, could I make comment, please?
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Swift, didn't see your hand. On you go.
No, as I turned my screen off so I don't pollute everybody else's screen while I'm not talking. Anyway, moving on.
Very kind of you.
Well, I thought it was fair. In Annex 1, we see, and what looks like, because Julie was kind enough to send me a longer run data set, but it looks like male life expectancy is declining. And I think when you put that in the context of doing less exercise, and we've already had COVID, that which has taken its toll of a lot of our older residents, I think we as a council should have some causes for concern around, we have an inequality, and lots of people like to talk about inequalities, and unjust treatment and, you know, what we need to treat unequals unequally to get a fairer outcome. We have female life expectancy still increasing, male life expectancy looking like it's dropping off, and yet we don't have any male-only specialist exercise programs which would encourage people towards greater fitness. One of the things that is quite clear and apparent over the last few years is if you look at obesity and diabetes, quite clearly we have many more people with diabetes and have become obese. It is most prevalent in the least affluent in society, but it is endemic overall. And I think we as a council probably need to sit back and think about what we're doing to encourage our elders to exercise. And I know from looking back and having complaints about the Culture and Leisure Trust, for people who are retired or semi-retired, but not quite pensioners, they don't get any special incentives around the financial tariffs to access leisure. And I think there are some things we could do to better encourage, particularly men. And I speak with some degree of self-interest, as not in the first flush of my youth, and definitely male, that there are things that we could do. And I think we as a council should be having those internal discussions.
Okay, points well made. I'm sure it will be taken forward and acted upon. Thank you, Councillor Swift. Can I move on then to the next item, which was the community plan and the annual performance report and the fairer East Wren transition plans. Again, it's here for approval this evening, but very happy to take any questions that people have. I mean, I'm very conscious these papers tend to merge into one another, and many of the points being made are pertinent to them all. But happy to take any points in this specific one that anybody may have. Councillor Buchanan.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. I think, as I kind of touched on earlier, this plan, I think, in this year more than any other, we have looked towards our community planning partners to get through the year and the difficulties that we've faced. And I think we started from a fortunate position. I think we've always had a good record with our community planning partners and been able to sit around the table together and discuss the needs of our respective communities. And I think this year more than ever, that benefited us because we were able to very quickly move to support our communities in ways which we probably never envisaged that we would need to. And I think that not only from the council's point of view, but from our voluntary services, from voluntary action, and from all of the community groups that we work with, that has been one of the vital aspects across East Renfrewshire in trying to tackle the worst aspects of the pandemic. So I think this report, although based on a range of positive examples of partnership working, and there are numerous ones that we would include, from mutual aid groups, from town centre recovery, providing volunteers for community transport to vaccination centres, supplying medical supplies, prescriptions to individuals, supplying food to individuals. I think that the establishment of a wellbeing network, which had 28 organisations, a food dignity network with 13 organisations, and of course our own digital partnership working with 8 organisations. I think all of that from the authority and all of our partners, I think it has to be highlighted that this has been not only an extremely difficult year, but it has been a year which has highlighted the close work and the integrated work that gets done across our communities with very many of our organisations who have been there to support residents over the last 15 months. And I think that says a lot for the area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cannon. Any other comments on the report anybody wants to make? No, okay. Can we approve that then, or accept it? So yeah, I've got to approve it. Thank you. And moving on then to the item number 16, which is the update on the temporary works quick quote threshold to support COVID-19 construction recovery. So there was a bit of a discussion, I think, last year around this when we introduced this. So I'm happy to take any comments that anybody may have here this evening, or are we happy to accept the proposal in front of you? Councillor Buchanan.
Yeah.
You're on mute. You're on mute.
Tony.
Sorry, Barbara. Yeah, and you would get caught out at some point. Yeah, this just touches on the previous decision that we'd taken to the amendment to standing orders, which was to offer the quick quote service and increase the threshold from £150,000 to £500,000 and put it in place for a year from June 2020. Obviously, that time has now expired. However, what we do know is that the quick quote is an online quotation facility. It's been part of our public sector contracts Scotland portal and allows the reduced timescales for the quotation activity whilst maintaining formal procurement rigour and requirements. As in, it's not a shortcut, it's simply an effective way to manage procurement, and it doesn't do away with the tender process. That all still plays its part. So in addition to just reducing the timescales for lower value and lower risk works of contracts, I think 7 contracts have benefited, council contracts have benefited from this in the last 12 months. We touched earlier on issues of procurement and how it would impact. Some authorities already operate under the basis that the quick quote system operates for contracts under 2 million. We're obviously not looking to do that. What we would like to do is provide a proportionate approach, minimising the resources in the procurement process for both the council and suppliers, whilst ensuring best value and encouraging local suppliers to bid for the work from the council. Quick quote thresholds above 500,000 are also utilised by a number of other local authorities across Scotland. And so effectively, based on the information contained in the report and the additional checks, procurement will now add to the quick quote process. The council is asked to approve the permanent increase of the quick quote threshold for works from 150,000 to 500,000 and to note the activities undertaken in the last 12 months, as can be seen at Appendix 1. Again, local areas, it's touched on, we had the discussion earlier in terms of procurement. I know Councillor Aitken came in and made a point about EU legislation. Well, there are ways to look at that, and certainly one of the aspects that you might look at in procurement is how local it is, and are you supporting our net zero challenge by not having something delivered from Italy, but rather getting it procured in the nearer proximity or indeed just round the corner. And EU legislation doesn't actually stop that, and it never has. However, we are asked in this paper, colleagues, to look at the process and to make it a permanent process to increase our quick quote approach regulations.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Buchanan, for that background to that. Councillor Wallace. You're on mute, Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, sorry. I don't necessarily welcome the paper, but I do understand where it's coming from. The concern is when you're raising the barrier as to what effect it has on transparency, best value, etc. But I don't think there's any question that because there are a lower number of individuals that have to quote, it's a greater attraction for local businesses, smaller local businesses, in order to compete. And I would say that on that basis, and it does help promote local business, I can't see any reason against it. I know Councillor Miller and the Audit Committee has mentioned about the fraud side of things, etc. And I know there's a very strong focus on making sure that there is nothing untoward. But the system, whether it is on the higher basis, it's very much controlled, it is very transparent, and as I say, just to cut this completely short, it does help local business. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wallace. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Provost. And first of all, I'd like to say thanks to Debbie Hill and Mrs. McMillan for having a Teams meeting to discuss this and to give us what's behind it. But in principle, I do agree with the increase from the up to 200 up to 500,000 for the quick quotes. I'm sure everyone will appreciate that costs are rising, and it doesn't really matter whether it's household costs or council costs. Therefore, it's a lot fewer. There are a lot fewer council contracts costing less than 150k. This is the added incentive for local companies to tender for local work and not having to compete with pan-European or worldwide tenders. For example, I know of one council contract which was won by a firm in the northeast of Scotland, which is fair enough. But when we were needing spare parts after the breakdown, machines were off the road for longer whilst we waited and firms to get the parts and come down and repair the machines. If we'd accepted the tender from the local firm, which is only marginally different, that machine could have been repaired back in the road an awful lot sooner. The one aspect of the report does concern me. It's obviously, I don't know the current cost, but it does seem excessive to pay for $500,000 for the segregation lane in Ayr Road. And when I witnessed the mess that the roads department have made in Davyland Road, where I do fear there will be a serious accident due to the reconfiguration of road markings, it doesn't exactly fill me with confidence that Ayr Road will end up much the same way. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Miller. Councillor Swift.
Thank you, Provost. My concern, I mean, I think it's lovely. It's motherhood and apple pie if we award all our contracts to local contractors and everything would be wonderful, except there is an issue around best value. And the issue around best value, the whole idea of having a procurement system that was EU-wide, and obviously it's still Europe-wide, we have issues around potential best value, and we may not be getting the best we can value out of the public pound, and we don't. I mean, every time we look at our budget lines, we know that we have millions of pounds to save, and we have got steep amounts of savings to try and generate. And I think constraining stuff to a local market alone is contorting the market. Or I'm concerned about not opening things up to watch on a much wider basis. That would be my grave concern, and that we end up costing the taxpayer more.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Swift. Mrs. Hill.
Thank you to all the councillors who've commented. Maybe I just wanted to come in to give some comfort, if I could, to provide reassurance that the quick quote process is completely auditable. It's a lockdown process whereby bidders submit their bids, which are not seen by anybody, including the procurement unit, until the closing date and time has passed. Every quick quote that goes out includes a specification, a bill of material or a commercial offer. It includes an evaluation criteria, which is going to be reviewed by procurement as part of the changes that we've noted in the report. So it was really just to give you assurance that it is a compliant, it is a rigorous, and it is a transparent process. Bidders get the opportunity to bid as they would for a tender. It's just a shortened process. If we think of the timescales for quick quote, we're looking at maybe 15 working days, as opposed to a minimum of, say, 60 working days for a full ITT. What we have found from bidders is that feedback is that they don't welcome works projects under $500,000 being full ITTs due to the resources that it takes and the time in which to respond to full tender activity. So it's really just to try and give you some of that background to hopefully help you understand a bit better the report that's forward tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. Are there any other points on the report? I think there was kind of broad support for it, with perhaps exception of Councillor Swift, but I don't think you were moving against it, Councillor Swift. Correct me.
I am not moving against it, Provost.
Okay, thank you for that confirmation. So can we accept that report then? And move on to item number 17, which is the COVID-19 Recovery Action Update. So again, happy to take any questions on the report in front of you about how we're recovering from COVID. It seems to be never ending. Any points on the report? No, just for noting. Okay, thank you. We'll accept that. And can we take the last
Yeah, just very briefly, just cast my eyes over it. Am I right in saying that there were 7 council meetings scheduled for 2022? Normally, I think there's 9, and I would only assume that that's got something to do with the fact that it's an election year.
Provost, that's correct. In normal circumstances, there would be more meetings, but as Councillor MacDonald has just said there, in light of the elections next year, we've had to sort of revamp the timetable slightly, which does result in there being a reduction in some meetings.
Okay. Thank you for that confirmation, Mr. Daly. I mean, I guess we're approving a timetable, but I assume that the new council that's elected in May would have the ability to vary that if it so wished. Is that correct, Mr. Daly?
Yes, Provost, that's correct. And also, you know, there is the facility, I think, as is mentioned in standing orders, for committees themselves, once the dates have been approved by the council, to review their own dates if they want to. But you're absolutely right in terms of what you say as far as the new council. If it wanted to revisit the timetable, it could certainly do that.
Okay, thank you for that confirmation. Okay, can we approve that tentative set of meetings for 2022? As I say, it won't apply to us all. It will apply to some. Some are retiring and some might get knocked out that want to be coming back, as happens in politics. But anyway, it's there as a tentative timetable for us all anyway. So, Councillor Grant, do you want to say anything on it? Yeah, I see your hand.
I just wanted to say that after the beginning of May, when I'm no longer a councillor, I'll be quite happy to do some training for new councillors when they come in after 34 years of experience, a bit like yourself. I'm sure I could guide a lot of new councillors on the right road for the future.
Yeah, well, maybe. I may be tempted to join you, but I'm sure the new councillors will know it all and want to do it their own way. So, Councillor Wallace.
I was just going to say, we're trying to encourage new councillors, not.
I was going to say, is that a threat or a promise?
Okay, thank you very much for your contributions tonight and for behaving properly. Councillor Buchanan.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. Yeah, thanks to everyone for this evening. And can I just say, hopefully everyone will have an enjoyable recess, as much as it is and as much as there are limitations in what we can and can't do. But hopefully everyone will have a healthy and happy break and look forward to seeing you all in August. Thank you.
And I would certainly
Thank you.
Thank you for your attendance. See you.
Goodbye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.